Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for those who are in India. My name is Api Okwiri. I'm a project manager with OBREAL Global, and I'm happy and humbled to be with you here today. I'll just take a few minutes to give you a short background on the Interregional Dialogue series from OBREAL Global, and just to let you understand where we came from and where we are at the moment, and the basic importance of concentrating on this particular topic. My colleague Jimena will then carry on and explain to you in depth specifically about today's webinar. Now, the Interregional Dialogue series is one of the core components of what OBREAL Global does. But I'll just give you a short background on what is our mission, our vision, and our values. OBREAL Global was formed as to bring together networking of institutions between Europe and Latin America from early in 2004. And from there, it then developed and encompassed the different regions that are within the organization. Now, our vision majorly is to facilitate and achieve sustainable South-South-North cooperation based on reciprocity and knowledge transfer. So we are literally committed to ensure that we have a continuous collaboration and talking between the different regions. We aim to promote dialogue and synergies between the government, academic institutions, social infrastructure, social institutions, taking into account specific contexts of the different regions and ensuring that we take into account the heterogeneity of each of the regions of the world. We are building together an interregional South-South-North and global bridges to enhance development in higher education, research sector, specifically through multi-regional collaborative efforts. And we ensure that our values encompass innovation, inclusiveness, diversities, and sustainability. And specifically, we put it into bracket multilingualism. Why do I emphasize on that? Because it's a reality that the different regions, we communicate in different languages. And so at OBREAL Global, we try to ensure that in each and every event that we're taking, we are carrying out, or activity that we are carrying out, to ensure that people are able to communicate in the language that they best understand, or they're able to communicate their specific actions. And therefore, we also make sure that the audience that are also able to understand that in the language that they're comfortable with. So you'll find that even in this webinar, we have interpretation from Spanish to English. And so if you're comfortable participating in this event in English, please ensure that you choose that. If you're comfortable understanding in Spanish, please ensure that you choose the interpretation in Spanish so that we can all move together and understand each other. Now, at OBREAL Global, we have three major pillars. One is data, policy, and knowledge production. So we try to ensure that we are producing knowledge goods that then can be able to enhance the interregional competencies of our partners. Then we also ensuring that we continuously carry out capacity building in each and every sector that we are working on. And most importantly, as I mentioned above, trying to encourage interregional policy dialogue throughout it's transversal throughout all our activities, so that we have at any particular point, if something is happening in Africa, then we are also able to ensure that we have our Latin America colleagues, we have our Indian colleagues, we have our European colleagues being able to understand and also participate in those particular events. Now, the Interregional Dialogue has a background. The first successful Interregional Dialogue in higher education meeting was held in June 2020. And as we all know, it seems a little bit distant now, but it was during the pandemic and it was really, really crucial. But that also made it in somehow easier because you know that before the pandemic, people needed to travel to be able to talk. And so during the pandemic, one of the benefits of the pandemic, unfortunately, we had a lot of disadvantages of the pandemic, but one of the benefits that it was also possible for us to be able to start communicating virtually. And this, we've seen that it has also enhanced our core competence of trying to bring the different regions together. So the first event was held in 2020, and this was co-organized by our colleagues in Colombia, SCUN, AAU, the Association of African Universities in Africa. We have the AUGM and OBREAL Global. And in this discussion, we were trying to find ways of how do we then go about the interregional dialogue discussions. So the intention was, after the event, the way forward was to focus on interregional relations, try to ensure that we have our colleagues from Africa, we have our colleagues from India, we have our colleagues from Europe and from Latin America being able to have relations throughout. And then the second point that was agreed on was to convene in a flexible manner actors of varying natures, committed to our objectives with perhaps limited history of each other. And this, therefore, as we have come to know throughout history, as much as it's trying to be, most of the times it's looked under, is the southern countries share a lot in common. And so it is very important that the different southern countries then understand what is happening. And most of the times you find colleagues from Africa don't know anything that is happening in Latin America in terms of higher education, research capacities, and vice versa. So it is important that the different regions that have limited working relations are taken into account. Then the third point that was agreed on in this particular meeting was to articulate policy dialogue with concrete projects. So that we are moving just beyond the discussion, we move into action immediately. And then the last point that was agreed on was to create a loose but effective coordinating structure with potential working points that therefore drive both research and project development, underpinning the different dialogue initiatives that we have with concrete projects. So throughout our discussions, we encourage our participants, we encourage our members to come up with concrete projects to enhance and to ensure that the different discussions and relations are continuous. Now, that was the background of how we then came into this carrying out the Interregional Dialogue series. So the first edition of the Interregional Dialogue series took place in 2021. And this one, we called it the Brilliant Focus because it was the launch of the dialogue series. And we focused on a full month looking at the different areas. One of the areas was the policy, modalities, and programs of South-South-North cooperation, looking at what is already existing. It's quite important to look at what is already existing. And then the other point of topic was on digitalization. We had the webinar series that then carried out all through these different topics. We also had a webinar series on innovative international teaching. This was related to one of the projects that we were doing that was COIL. And then upskilling, another webinar that we carried out was upskilling, reskilling, modularization, flexible learning pathways. And in each and every of these topics, we had different regions participating and then giving input on what is happening in their region, and also trying to see how then we can interact and see how to move forward with these different topics. The other webinar series we had was the role of higher education institutions in local and regional development. We are all conversant with the fact that higher education is critical to development, and specifically for Africa, for the South, and for Latin America, for India, it's very important because this is whereby we are getting our human resource and human capital. Then the other webinar series we had was on research management capacities. And then the last webinar series we had was regional integration frameworks, policies, and instrument. This then laid the background for, how do we then move forward? What is already existing? What are the critical topics that are very important and are crucial to start this particular dialogue series? Now, this happened in 2021. Then by the end of 2021, we started the second edition. And we now doing this series is now the second edition, and we've separated it into different parts to ensure that we concentrate on specific topics that are crucial to our different regions and are crucial to our members. And so in part one, we had India and Latin America dialogue on internationalization of higher education. And this particular series was co-organized with our partners in Brazil, FAUBE, Symbiosis International in India, and FICC. This was in 2021. Then in part two, we carried out a second session of the series, and this was between Africa, South America, and Caribbean. And this dialogue was concentrating on the SDGs. This was co-organized also with our partner institutions in Africa, that is Serua, my partner institution in Colombia, Spoon, and Universities Caribbean for the Caribbean region. And this happened last year, 2022. Now, in 2023, we want to now also concentrate on the topic of women, innovation, and science. And it's critical to emphasize that this is very important, because we find that development does not happen in a vacuum where there are no women. And in critical points, most of the times you find that women are the driving force on innovation, and they're the consumers of innovation. So it's very important that as an institution of OBREAL Global and our partners, we also take a very important step to have this discussion that then will ensure that we have this. So this event is co-organized by our partners with the EU-LAC Foundation. And it is, I just want to emphasize that from a OBREAL Global perspective, it is important that we take into account the different parties, partners, and institutions that are crucial for the development of the South-South relations. And of course, not forgetting the relation with the northern countries. So just to come to a stop so that I don't take too much time, this was just laying the background on how, as OBREAL Global, we've come to this interregional dialogue series. So thank you, Jimena. I'll give the floor back to you.
Thank you very much, Apio, for this introduction. I'm Jimena Estrella from OBREAL Global, Advisor for Innovation, and thank you for all the participants that have registered from all over the world to see and to listen these three distinguished women in innovation that will tell us, will comment us on their role and their perspectives on innovation and the role women can have. As Apio mentioned, this series is designed to think on women, innovation and science, challenges and opportunities with a multi-regional perspective. And I want to assess, before giving the floor to our panelists, that we have designed this series with a focus on innovation, but we want to assess this issue by three dimensions. The first one is women. We want to put women on the center of this dialogue, of this discussion, to understand the role and how we can leverage our role. The second dimension is the multi-regional perspective. We think from OBREAL Global that it's a very interesting and useful perspective to learn from each other and to put in practice experiences from different regions. And the third dimension is a multi-sectoral dimension. As you can see in this session and in the next ones, we will have private companies, public government, and academia sharing and discussing on their perspectives and their views. This is designed for this, just to listen to each other, because innovation is only generated if we listen to each other, if we learn from each other, first identifying the problems, and this is the idea of this first webinar, to have the public government view and the private sector view, so that universities can start understanding on that. They can continue understanding the problems and then start thinking on the ways we can put our researchers, our labs, and all our capacities to solve this in a creative way, and therefore offering innovative solutions to the demands of our society. So thank you for all our panelists. I will now introduce you. I'm very happy to have you here. We have Fabiana Braco from Uruguay, a fifth-generation wine producer. She became the family's first wine merchant, and she launched Braco Bosca Winery in 2005, a really successful worldwide winery. Her innovative portfolio of fresh, vibrant wines is quickly gaining reputation around the world. So I'm very happy, Fabiana, to have you here. From another region, from India, and also from the private sector, from another very strong economic sector worldwide, Namita Tapar, Executive Director of MQ Pharmaceuticals. She's the head and director of this company, which is an Indian global pharmaceutical company, and she's one of the well-known businesswomen and investors in the field of pharma, not only in India, but also worldwide. Thank you, Namita, for being here with us. I know it's very late for you, so we really appreciate your effort. And Sydney Carolina Bernal from the public governmental sector from Colombia. She is Deputy Director of References and Evaluation of Educational Quality at the Ministry of Education in Colombia, and she has been selected within the top 50 of best researchers in the world by the Global Teachers Prize. And also she has been awarded with the Best Teacher in America last year. So very honored to have you here and to share this webinar with you. To start with, I will launch this first question that is intended to know the panorama in your different countries and your different sectors on innovation, to understand the position of women on innovation topics, on the innovation agenda, and how has this evolved in your region. Fabiana, if you want to start, we are happy to listen to you.
Thank you, Jimena. Welcome, everybody. I hope there's many women, but also there are many men listening to us today. That's the idea, to keep sharing and learning. In Uruguay, it's quite interesting, especially even in my own sector, the development we have had in terms of innovation. You have to think that if you think in my specific area, which is the wines, we have had along all our lives a very strong position in women, because if you think of my grandmother, she was the one who kind of ruled a lot of things regarding the vigneron at that time. But at that time, you have to think it was difficult to do innovation, because to be able to do innovation and to create, it has, of course, a very strong link to what is related to technology and to be able to think and be creative. And at that time, people have to be thinking more and more about how to coexist between your work and your kids and the labors of the home, which was quite kind of different. Then my mom took over also, and she's also with a strong character. I think this is something we have in our bloods in the family. So in a way, she also had like a special view and renew a lot of things. So when I came into the scene, there were already two big women working on the field in the past to convert what is today. If I have to think about Uruguay in general terms today, it's really unique in terms that we have in, important decision makers are women, like our vice president of Uruguay is a woman, like the president of our agency of innovation and our agency for research and development, it's also a woman. So I believe we have had, in this perspective, a very special role. Women, we have this special characteristic of all of our lives. We have been, through history, able to be very strong and very creative. We make people happy all our lives. We bring kids. So in one sense, I think we have this caring and sensitive, that it was kind of put to ourselves on a weakness that we can convert in our stronger activity of the way we think and the way we act, the solidarity, the being proactive. Even in my own winery, if you think today, 50% of the employees is women. And it's not only because I do believe on it and I have to cross some barriers, because if you ask some of the other employees, they think, oh, a girl cannot jump into a tank or go with a bomb and, pump over all the wines. And these kind of activities that are thought for men. And in our case, we are totally able to do it with women too. And it took me a little bit to convince people that we could bring that to the scene. And in terms of how can mentorship helps in many senses, I think even for ourselves, I teach in the university also. And I think one of the main things have been to open our minds and be more creative and create opportunities and give a little bit of confidence to people, because one of the first things to be creative and to be able to produce and innovate is also to have confidence on our own work, on our own desires. And also the connections, it's a very strong thing, because one thing in my country, which in some areas is very well connected, in some is not. So in the countryside, we have created in different associations and different governmental also activities, connection side between new techniques that people can, even in pandemic, be able to arrive into different technology to be learning different things. There's some even courses called How to Keep Selling During Pandemic that were really interesting to allow people to grow in that terms. And also the president's wife has an association called Sembrando, which means seeding, that he gives opportunities to people who is starting to grow and starting to develop their own business. And even in our case, for instance, they help us to be able to get in supermarkets. We were not able to get in supermarkets because we were very, little, and then we didn't have sometimes the capacity, financial capacity to enter in supermarkets, that they ask for a lot of things, especially financially, to enter. And they create a special shelf for these little companies to be shown in a special area and to make awareness, to create awareness of all of that. So I do believe Uruguay is in a good moment. We have a strong past with women, but I think we have even a better future.
Thank you, Fabiana, for this overview of Uruguay and mention on your sector, on the wine sector. Thank you. Sydney, if you want to contribute with this, giving your view on the subject.
Thank you, Jimena. Greeting to all from Colombia. It's an honor to share with such wonderful women a space to create, dream, and share experience for our countries. I want to tell you, as a proud teacher of being Colombian, we have a country with a lot of agro-industrial wealth, with quite a strong weather, with two great ports for the Pacific and the Atlantic. We are in the task of taking the strengths that Colombians have offering 10 abroad. So that test for any investment are reflected in a better educational and cultural investment for the population. Innovation projects fall into 4 groups: innovation in management, in process, in products, in technological services, and training. In Colombia, this is a national system of innovation, the growth and social development of science, technology, and innovation. The participation of Colombian women in innovation has increased. For example, in 2015, we have 14% of women participating in innovation projects and programs. By 2022, we are increasing towards 40% of creation and development. This percentage will continue to increase participating in various programs. I share some programs: Women in the Cloud, Satellites to Inspire Other Women, articulation between all those disciplines, that is education, state, culture, environment, technology, health, sports, and politics. That is why it is important for women to recognize themselves and others as agents of change within the national system of science, technology, and innovation. We women are forced, and each one can become transformative of their contacts. For 2015, the use of knowledge. Progress needs to be made in eliminated stereotypes. We are imaginaries of the reduced role of women in science and research. Women are determined. We are different disciplines, passionate. We do not leave the project of the way, but we think about more faces and opportunities to grow. Project development motivating our gears to study various areas, eliminating gender labors, participate in various regional, national, and international calls, coordinate with other disciplines. In my role as a teacher, it's very important to motivate my students to develop in different areas of innovation. And we're in networks a one woman from Colombia to the world allows learning about disciplines, roles, approaches to project development, calls for participation, sharing and teaching learning, strategies that respond to the needs and of contexts that reach our corners of Colombia, impact on territories. We're in learning networks alone the participation of more women who recognize the importance of co-creating to share experience that improve our quality of life. The union makes the strength. No more. Thank you for all. Thank you, Jimena.
Thank you, Sydney. Thank you for sharing your view on this. Mrs. Navmita, if you want to share your view.
Sure, thank you. So it was wonderful listening to Sydney and Fabiana. And Fabiana, congratulations for having 50% women in your company. That's a fantastic statistic. I always wonder that when women are 50% of the population, why are we such a small percent of the workforce? So when I talk about India, we're under 20% of the workforce. And after COVID, things became worse because a lot of women had to take a backseat to take the burden of housework and just taking care of people. And so this number of women in the workforce is even lower now than it was pre-COVID. And that is extremely unfortunate. No matter what numbers you look at. So for example, if you look at women in STEM in India, when you look at the women graduating from colleges in science and technology, it's the same as the US, which is about 43% of the graduates are women in India. 44% of the women are graduates in America. But when you look at the workforce, the numbers are 14% in India versus 28% in the US. So, very typical thing that you see in India is that you have a lot of women in science, in technology, in innovation, when it comes to education and getting the degrees, but then a lot of them either don't join the workforce or because of societal issues, childcare, elder care, they take a backseat once they join. And that's really unfortunate because as a country, we're really losing out on some very strong talent pool by not having a larger representation, both at a macro level in the workforce, as well as when you talk specifically about science and innovation. Same thing in my company, in pharmaceuticals. Most of the people we employ are sales representatives, and they have to go at really odd hours, 10 at night, 11 at night, post-clinic hours to meet the doctors. And that's not really very conducive or very friendly work environment for women, especially because a lot of the cities have safety issues, transportation issues. And so those kind of hours are not the best hours for women. But yes, at my company, we do have a lot of women in marketing, in HR, in finance, in IT, as well as regulatory and quality. So that is definitely reassuring. In my company, we have a mandate that for every vacancy, when HR gives us 5 resumes, we insist that 2 of the 5 have to be of women. So it takes them longer to get those resumes to us. But, if you make some of these policy changes at HR, at recruitment level, then slowly these statistics can change. I also do a lot of investment in entrepreneurship in startup companies in my country. And I just was amazed by global statistics that only 2.3% of women-led companies get funded globally. I mean, that's just a really bad statistic. So, and this is a global statistic. It's not just India. So, all these numbers that I'm throwing out there just shows that as a country, as a global force, we're just losing out on a massive talent pool. And there are 2 women I like to follow. One is Indra Nooyi and second is Sheryl Sandberg. And when you read their books, they have different reasons for why this is happening. So Indra Nooyi specifically talks about the absence of really good childcare and elderly care. And the absence of these facilities and infrastructure is what holds women back globally. And Sheryl Sandberg makes a very interesting point, which I agree with completely, is that a lot of times women hold themselves back. they limit their dreams, they limit, their ability, and also don't speak up enough. So I think there are many societal factors, and I dream of a day that, maybe not in my lifetime, but at least my kids' lifetime, we see more and more parity in the workforce. So that would be wonderful to see some of these terrible statistics changing with every passing year.
Thank you, Namita. So we complete this first overview of the reality of Uruguay, of Colombia, and India, but with very interesting mentions on the world situation. That's why it's so useful to listen to you, because you have, from your industries and from the public sector, the view of the global thing, of the global issues, and we can quickly understand that our problems, we share problems, so it's very useful to share solutions and to share recommendations. That's the whole idea of this multi-regional approach. So you all mentioned confidence, communication, motivation, networking. So some things you are definitely doing on your spaces, on your roles, and we will try to fostering that with this kind of activities. So let's move forward to a second round of questions. Some of you have already go on this, but I would like to pay more attention on which are the barriers for innovation for women on these difficulties or these challenges innovation phase, on the times, on the multi-sectoral approach, on the creative things. Which are the barriers you think we are facing and that could lead to more impact on society, and how can women increase this impact? So Sydney, if you want to start, please.
Thank you, Jimena. Okay, in the second round of questions is the approach I work from my role in education. Is towards the development of research projects of children, young and adults from initial, basic, middle and higher education, for the recognition of skills, not from disabilities or difficulties. The basis of the strategy is the creation of digital and analog resources that allow the activation of the sense from the visual, hearing, and kinesthetic. My students select a group to accompany for 2 years to identify their context and co-create resources to enhance their skills. Our innovation is at the level in this process. We take on a role as prosumers of ideas, strategies, and resources, not just waiting to be content consumers. We really enjoy the experience of creating to help. Innovation is the opportunity to improve, empower, and develop from the identification of context issues, where the role of teachers, students, families, schools, universities, and all public and private sectors can participate in the development of projects and programs that impact the context, from the creation of new ideas to the necessary adjustments in what exists. Use as resources, sponsorship, but also participation, the challenge of motivating more Colombians to participate, encourage them to co-create, to innovate. I take this space to invite our girls from Colombia and the world to fulfill dreams from the opportunity to improve our society through innovation. Participating is the important and solid basis to share and make now to all of Colombia, the Colombian women who are leaving their mark of the world. For example, the program CHIE, C-H-I-E, for its Spanish acronym, Colombians Doing Research in Astroscience. Tator Colombian Andrea Guzman Mesa created, where she found 60 Colombian women around the world who are doing science. Stories need to be shared to replicate, inspire, and motivate more girls and women to participate. Thank you, Jimena.
Thank you very much, Sydney, for giving us a specific example of how Colombia, connecting to the world, can push a sector, astro-science, a very interesting and pushing sector. Thank you for that. Namita, if you want to share your views on this, on the barriers and how to increase impact.
Earlier I spoke about inadequate childcare, elder care, as well as women limiting themselves because of societal conditioning and not daring to dream big. In addition to this, one of the points that Sydney mentioned about having role models, right? So she's talking about how there were all these role models that came forward to inspire the next generation. And Fabiana earlier spoke about mentors, right? And so I think it's very important to have more women role models, more mentors. In my life, I've had 3 mentors who have had a massive, massive impact on my thinking, my career progression, my growth. All 3 are men, which is great. So we need to have both men as well as women champions for women. And the more we can do that, I think that also gives enormous amount of strength to the aspiring next generation.
Thank you. Thank you, Namita, for opening this and understanding that we need also, as you say, men to understand the role of women so that we can all together build this innovative and welfare society. Fabiana, if you want to address this issue, thank you.
Yeah, we don't have to forget that we took a read from them, but it's more than enough to help from the men. No, but I think it's interesting what Namita was saying, because in our case, I do believe also that some of the barriers we ourselves put it in ourselves. So we have to open our minds in that sense. Like in our winery, when I started and I heritated the winery, most of the people told me that one of the main varieties we have planted that was called Moscatel was a grape from women that only like to drink sweet wines and don't know about wines. And that was for me like, okay, this is going to change. And I'm going to be the motor for changing it. So I changed completely, together with my cousin, who's a man, the way of production, the way of pruning, the way of working in the vineyard, the way of working in the winery itself, to create a Moscatel which was dry. And it was a way to open people's mind and break all the preconcepts. In fact, we have the label with a tree upside down and a cat upside down to just call attention of the people. What is inside this bottle that is different? And it's creating something that creates awareness that we can go forward and in another region that people's minds is normally going through. So I do believe that in that case, we were very innovative. We create a lot of our storytelling to really mentor some people to be able to think that it's possible, which I believe is really important. The technology and the knowledge, we use it, but the technology in our case is very linked to the ancestral knowledge. That also is interesting to kind of explain to people that you don't need only technology. There's many things that could help to be creative and innovative. Of course, technology is important and help us, but also, as Jimena knows, because we've been talking a lot about sustainability, the whole project has become sustainable last year, but not only in terms of sustainability for the environment, but also for the work, the way we work and how we support our community and our people in the winery, all the emotional salary that is very important to the people who work with you. So I think some of the barriers are in our own minds and we have to break it, putting different examples. Of course, we need to break down the barrier for the cultural macho still sense of things that in Uruguay has been a little bit difficult in the past, but is being more and more open in the present time, and hopefully in the future we're working for that. Well, I think it's a matter of ourselves to be linked, to be talking about it, and to put examples of how things can be outside of the box. And create different things. And I put just the example of the Moscatel because I thought it was something that it really gives a clue of how to deal with things that people normally think that are usual, and we can make them very unusual. And I love that.
Thank you, Fabiana. we are moving forward to the third round of questions that, of course, as you are so proactive, you have answered some of the questions that we have thought for this third block. But I would like to ask you about some milestones that you've seen on your sector or in your country for women leadership. If you've seen some specific changes, some specific calls from the legislative point of view, from the economic point of view, that have pushed women on the scene, and that has helped motivating and generating examples. If you can share that in this understanding that we have similar problems and maybe those ideas can be useful for each of our countries. Please, Namita, if you want to start.
Sure. So, from a policy shaping perspective, we've had a very strong woman prime minister in the past. Our current finance minister is an exceptional woman with, a strong head on her shoulders. So we've had enough women at CEO levels, whether it's corporate, education institutes, philanthropy. We have enough women leaders at very high positions in the country. But when you count them, it's still a very small percentage when you look at India's entire population. At a policy level, there have been changes such as, a 6-month maternity leave and normalizing that. Work from home and hybrid work became acceptable and wasn't looked down upon. One of the only positive things I think that came out of COVID. And also things like having a certain number of women on boards was made mandatory by the Companies Act. So that just forces people to think through these issues. And, a lot of people feel that why should we have these policy changes of 6 months maternity or having women on the board? Isn't it too forced? But in a country with very, I don't know what the right word is, but dismal statistics, some of these policy changes are important because they give a signal to the country at large and to the population at large that this is an issue that needs to be addressed, spoken about, and have conversations about. Even in the health sector, there are 3 A's that I talk about, which is awareness, access, and affordability. And in all 3 areas, there are such massive gaps in our country. So when the World Economic Forum did a survey of 156 countries, India came in the bottom 2 in terms of women's health. And it's mainly because of an awareness gap. 50% of Indian women have anemia, which can really impact your productivity and lifestyle in a big way. And it's not that it's the women in the interiors or the poorer women who have anemia. This cuts across classes. It's really a classless condition. And I know so many of my own friends who don't get their health checkups done annually, who don't get that blood test done annually and are clueless about their health conditions, whether it's anemia or any other issue. So there's a big awareness gap. And health policy mandates some of this now. So policy changes, if done in moderation, and for the right reasons, can be a huge signal to change some of these statistics.
Thank you, Namita. You raised the issue of quotas, right? Of how we introduce this legislation, regulation that fixes or establishes a minimum percentage of women. We also have a lot of experience in Latin America. And it's interesting that you share also your view on that. If it can definitely helps, at least for a time period, right? And then hopefully we have that really inside ourselves, so we don't need that regulation. At least that's the objective. Sydney, if you want to share your view on this, on which steps can individuals and organizations take to promote more diversity, more women in innovation and technological fields?
Possibilities of participation, development of strategies and projects in the line of diversity and inclusion. Articulate the universal design of learning, for example, where the multiple forms of representation, motivation and expression are recognized. Open source resources, accessibility, cross-platform, inclusive cultural, digital, and social transformation. integrate the participation of all without language barriers, because part of these strategies is recognizing the other and the context as part of change. In this aspect, I want to tell you my experience with my students. We worked universal design for lending to accompany people with disabilities. There were we worked 4 phases, which are: number 1, investigate. We recognize the context. Number 2, project. We propose a digital and analog resource that allows creating an experience of activation of the senses. Number 3, lived experience. We implement the resources and projects create with the identified context. And number 4, value the process. Listen to the voice of experience to adjust what you need and evaluate to improve. In Colombia, we have gathered participation and calls for girls and women in innovation. Development of projects and programs such as Colombian National Innovation Systems, more women, more science, more equality. STEM territories that we participate from the Ministry of National Education, recognizing the role of teachers in the development of teaching and learning experience, school research seedbeds of all disciplines for co-creation of both digital and analog resources. For example, program Print Ciencias. Science is a thing of years of the teacher, years doing science. I invite you to know all this experience from Colombia for the world. And finally, development of programs in education's health environment. We currently have leading the Ministry of Education by a woman. In this moment, Aurora Vergara recognized the importance of knowing the context and reality of Colombians to take advantage of education as an opportunity to develop innovation. Thank you, Jimena.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sydney, for those examples and helping us learn about Colombia and all the lessons that we can learn from that. Fabiana, if you want to address this last question, and then we will have some minutes to interact with the audience and among yourselves.
Thank you, Jimena. Yes. In our case, I'd like to mention some institutions in Uruguay that are already working quite well in terms of all this. One is the ANI, which is the Innovation and Research Agency of Uruguay, that has a lot of programs. And you can even go to their webpage later and check what they are doing in terms of helping people to develop new business. There's also the ANDE, which is the National Agency of Development, that is also doing the one I mentioned, that the woman is a woman president, which is really cool. There's also developing things, and it's interesting that there's a lot of things for financial support in many innovation areas, but there's not so many specifically based on the gender, specifically for women. So I really invite these governmental agencies from our government to really do a little bit more effort in that terms, even though I have to confess that I have my own experience with my daughter, who is studying biotechnology, and she's doing like a really nice cosmetic business based on the polyphenols and resveratrol of the wine to create creams, for the face and for the body. And they help her a lot into develop the business, understanding the opportunities, getting the financial perspective of how to start with to make at least the first approach to the market. And then they have a secondary plan to really help the enterprises to develop. So there's a lot of new things. And I think which is good is to approach younger generation. Like in my case, my daughter is 20, but she's already trying to get involved in this and help getting some really nice help from these agencies. But there's also like universities, like my own university, ORT, where I teach international marketing, that they are developing now a leadership woman seminar, based more like in the postgrad, to really create new skills to lower these stereotypes that we are all talking about. And I think this will bring really new steps. Still, we need to do more. We need to we need to copy what is good. I have to talk to Namita with Sydney later to create new things. But also, it's interesting. Like in my case, in the winery, for instance, in the States, there is a program where people have to buy from leading woman companies. So there's a quote also for that. So we really, if you get to understand how every country works toward all these possibilities, I think it will give us also a really nice opportunity to develop these things and to help each other. There's in Uruguay a very nice institution called Ubuntu, yes, it's quite new, so I still don't know how to exactly pronounce, but they are very nice. And they have created a whole platform for people with disabilities, like, for autism, to go into a shopping center with different lights on. And so there's many things created by the woman that will change the future, and they're already changing it. So I do believe we have the strength to bring something very good for the future from all of us.
Thank you, Fabiana. Thank you, Sydney and Namita. It's been really inspiring to listen to you, and that was the whole objective. I'm sure for all the attendance, it was like this. We have some time for some questions, so if the participants want to ask, you have there the questions and answers space. You can do it from there. And now, if Fabiana, Sydney, and Namita, if you do have some questions for some of you, it will be good. Otherwise, I have tons of questions because it's been really motivating to listen to you. I don't know, Fabiana, Namita, or Sydney, if you want to ask one each other some questions.
I'd like to ask Fabiana a question. So Fabiana, firstly, congrats. I'm so happy your daughter's doing something that's different in skin, but still related to the family business, which is, with the wine as a base. So that's so cool. And I'd love to see some of her products. So do share the link with me. But I had a couple of quick questions for you because, you said you're fifth generation in the family business, and I'm second generation. And a lot of times, the family business women who are not the founders, but the second or third generation, don't get taken as seriously. And not just that, but even being a woman in the workforce, you do face few stereotypes. So I wanted to hear your experience in terms of how it's been both as a family business owner and a woman as a family business leader, and other stereotypes that you may have faced.
Well,
and sorry, Jimena, one quick thing. I have to log off in 5 minutes because I have another call at 7:30. It's evening my time. So I think after this, you will have to excuse me. But fantastic session, and I'm very curious to hear Fabiana's answer.
Yes, but for this answer, I need like another seminar, not 5 minutes. No, thank you, Namita. But it's a hard thing because you were so right. I didn't want it to be winemaker at the very beginning because I saw my parents suffering. If it was rain, if it was frost, if it was hail, everything that is related to climate conditions and to people is two factors that are the most important for this business and the more difficult to rule, impossible to rule, I would say, people and climate. But the human being, we always, and this is amazing, but probably most of you faced it, we always find our destiny in the past we took to avoid it. So here I am again in the wine business. After my father passed away, I had to take over the winery. But in the middle way, I learned a lot because I studied international relationships, and then a company called me and say, we know you like to sell and you speak several languages and you are from the wine business, you are born in a vineyard, so we like to bring you to help us on the export market. So I worked for many companies in the past in the export market to promote the wines besides taking my own business. And that helped me a lot to be the person I am today. And I also had really nice mentors, like you said. And the first one was a woman, but some of them were also men that create the person I am today. So I think mentorship is one of the most important clues in all what we have been talking about. But I've been suffering a lot. I need to learn, one of my bosses teach me how to learn how to pretend crazinesses. So sometimes when I faced certain opportunities that it could be interesting, but they were, in the limit, I pretend to be crazy, and it really worked all the time. And I didn't need to fight with anyone, and I got into my results most of the time. And I think to be a woman, it's to be chameleonic and to be able to read people. We have an ability that it's amazing. Women can listen to conversations at the same time. We can read people, and we can be very chameleonic and adapt to every culture. I think one of the things that are more important is this, to understand the difference in cultures and to be able to read them, to also be able to adapt your product or your service, what you are selling and exporting, or even in your own country. Or like Sydney was saying, the co-creation is a very important factor on whatever we do. So it has not been easy, but it's not impossible. And I think that's a challenge we all have here to be able to show the world that we still have more to go.
Very well said, Fabiana. And thank you for sharing so many examples from your personal life, both Fabiana as well as Sydney. It's been very inspiring for me at a personal level to listen to your stories and your thoughts on these issues. And Jimena, I'm really grateful that the organization brings together women to have these conversations, because a lot of these conversations are around difficult issues. And the more we talk about it, the more we will support each other and empower each other to bring change. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. And I'm leaving very inspired and very grateful. So hopefully we'll connect in person. You're all welcome to come to my country, and I'd be very happy to host you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Namita, bye. Thank you.
Welcome to stay with us. We have some nice cabins, as you see behind my picture. That's in the wine.
I'm going to connect with you offline. I think that's a very, very tempting offer.
Perfect.
Bye.
Bye, Namita. Jimena, is possible to take this opportunity to ask Fabiana?
Of course. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Fabiana, to send a message to Colombian girls and women to participate in innovation.
Well, I do believe, like I said, innovation is part of my own life. I've been innovative all my life because it's in my essence. Maybe it's because too much wine. I don't know. Maybe they have to drink a little bit of wine too. No, seriously. I do believe that innovation is a part of our past to be able to always, especially the ones we teach also, we have that to be updated, to be willing to learn more. And I think it's important for their careers, but also for their own way of being, to be innovative, because that creates a lot of, strong to people. They give strength to people to really communicate and transmit. And the people who sometimes believe, I'm not going to be able to do it, and they realize that they can, these are the best mentors to the new generations also. So I really encourage you to connect with the university, to connect with Sydney, to connect with us if you need any help to really understand how to move forward. But I think that the best action is to take action, in fact, and to start moving forward. And in different areas, it doesn't matter what is your area. There's always innovation in any simple things. It doesn't have to be like the main technology or scientific innovation. There's also innovation in simple things, like in changing the way a wine can be poured, or the label communication with some skills, right now we are going to start like a series of videos where we will explain every wine and the technical sheets through a video that it will be with a QR code. So I will be able to arrive in people's houses and be explaining the wine and what is behind myself in a very, interactive way. And I think that is an innovation also. So there's several things we can do. And the most important thing is not to stay quiet, is to take action.
Thank you very much, Fabiana. We are running on time, but I want Sydney, as a teacher, and I know many people from the audience are teachers, professors from university level or bachelor's level, just to tell them something about your role on innovation, your role as a women leader.
A teacher is very important because it's a possibilities of participation, development of strategies and projects. In my particular, is possible to this development projects with in the line of diversity and inclusion. It's a very important to recognize the context, recognize territories, and not see the people with disabilities only difficulties. Maybe it's possible to learning to accompany people because it's necessary to develop experience with my students. It's necessary to recognize the context, and it's a difficulties of connectivity in Colombia. It's necessary to propose develop these projects and digital and analog resources. Is necessary to creating an experience of activation of the sense. In my role of teacher is very important because it's a shared experience and highlighting the role of girls and women in innovation and continue to co-creating and dreaming to innovate. It's possible because Colombia is a developing collaborative innovation strategies promoting collaborative projects between leading companies. It's necessary to articulate science, medicine, teaching, different disciplines, because it's necessary to develop projects in other areas. It is possible to develop different projects and without training programs without gender lens. Start training for the initial education, enhance secondary education with various programs or articulation with higher education. Publicize programs in Colombia to participate, and knowing examples of Colombian women is a development. For example, 60 women for the SHIA program. It's necessary recognition allows us to motivate ourselves. It is possible to fulfill dreams. Reach territories of Colombia, identifying the talents, opportunities, and experience that recognize the importance of innovation in all contexts. Thank you, Jimena.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's time to finish. They are saying hello from different countries, and they're really thankful, as I am, for this time we've shared. I would like just to mention some of the words of the concepts that you have mentioned here that I think are very powerful and give us the seed to grow this, that we need a new network we need to build on. You all mentioned motivation and awareness as something we need to do together to motivate us, to motivate the others, to be mentors, good mentors of others. That's like an extra role we don't need to forget, because you are inspirations for a lot of women. So you have to take on that role. I know you do it, but I want to push and to foster this, that you in your regions, in your economic sectors, in your activities are real examples. And that's a compromise I know you all have and assume, and it's very good to convey and to transmit the message you are doing and you are communicating. Another concept you all mentioned was co-creation and networking, something that is very related to how we co-create. And in that sense, women, we do have an advantage and a strength. We know how to co-create. We know how to build networks and how to connect with people. And if we don't know it, we need to improve it. But that's something inside the concept of innovation, inside ourselves. So it's something we need to push forward. Another thing I took from this is the idea of innovation, not only from the technological point of view. And I'm very happy you brought this to this table, because innovation, in fact, is everything we can do to assess problems and needs from the society, and in doing so, we do it from a creative point of view, and that includes technology, but it's also social innovation. So it's really good that you mentioned this, and also some interesting examples that I just want to give the title just to to remember the audience, very nice experiences you all mentioned. Fabiana, you mentioned the state buying some women producers, like a quota for women producers, and you also mentioned the emotional salary as a way to motivate people, the 50% women that you have in your company. So I think that's a very interesting experience for the private, but also for the public sector. Sydney, you mentioned this Astroscience Global Network, very interesting one with focus on a topic, but with a global perspective. I think there's an issue there, generating global networks. And Namita gave us this example of the recruitment strategies on how to push curriculums to be at least 0.5% of the number you want to have an interview with. And I think these are really good initiatives that we can all take to our companies, our institutions, to push forward, understanding that we definitely have a role, a very important role in innovation, in solving and helping solve the needs that our society have from the different roles and perspectives each of us have and can share. So thank you very much to all of you, to all the audience following us from all over the world. The video will be available also in YouTube. And I would like to invite you to the next session on June 16th, specifically devoted to women and science, something you all mentioned, and we want to put a focus on that, on the difficulties, but mainly on the opportunities, the challenges, and the strategies to address this issue and push for a more equal scenario and a more fair world. Thank you, Fabiana. Thank you, Sydney, and thank you, all the audience.
Thank you, Jimena. Thank you, Fabiana.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon all.
Thank you.